Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about the Big 12 and Florida State and Clemson, how that might just be a possibility for the future. And before we move on, I do want to answer Anthony's question over here. Frankly, no, I don't think they fit very well culturally into the Big 12, but at the end of the day, a lot of this is around money and not too much about the fit in the conference. So I'm leaning more towards that when I talk about that. But at the end of the day, it'll be fascinating to watch that unfold. There's no two ways about that. But let's get into the Georgia conversation because this is one that has been lingering for quite some time. I've thought of talking about it a couple of different times as some of these other incidences popped up, but I wanted to just be careful. I wanted to make sure that I came into this with a fully formed take with not a lot of emotion, not, going after anyone by any means, and just being very level headed as I enter this. So I first just want to get into what happened over the last couple of days at UGA, and it's something that has been happening just far too often lately. Georgia linebacker Smile Mondin, that guy right there, and Bo Hewley. Oh, excuse me, I apologize for that. And Bo Hewley were arrested for traffic-related instances on back-to-back nights. Bo Hewley was arrested for reckless driving. He was speeding, I think, going about 82 in a 65. And then we had Smile Mondin, who was racing, and he was racing DeMello Jones, who is a freshman cornerback on the team. This brings the total up to about 20 to 21 incidences since the tragedy that happened in 2023, January 2023, where Devin Willock, offensive lineman on the team, and Chandler LaCroix, a recruiting director, lost their lives in a incident that was a racing incident. That was obviously a horrifying tragedy that happened to UGA a couple of years ago, and it's something that has been really a black mark on Kirby Smart's time at Georgia. And it's been something that has really been the only black mark. And it's been really, really frustrating more than anything else, I think. And I think more than, and if it's frustrating for anyone, I think it's frustrating for that guy right there. I've heard a lot of sentiment over the last couple of days of Kirby's not doing enough, or Kirby allows his kids to get away with anything, and X, Y, and Z about Kirby Smart. I can almost promise you, Kirby Smart and his staff are doing everything in their power to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen. I can promise you they have brought in people to speak to them. They have done seminars. They have done whatever they can to make sure that these kids understand what they're doing, understand that their actions have real life consequences, and this is just not who they are. And I think that's something that has got to be just remarkably frustrating from a staff perspective, from the people around this program that are just trying to help out, that these kids keep making this decision. And it's not to take entire blame off of Kirby Smart. This is his program, right? The buck stops with him in a lot of ways. This is his program. He is the head guy, so he is going to get a lot of flack for this. In the SEC media days coming up, he will be asked about this a ton, and he'll have to answer. And it's one of those things that is going to be a very, very interesting thing to hear those answers. And the other thing I've heard a lot over the last couple of days is, oh, the culture is terrible at Georgia, and they don't do the right things, and they don't do right by these kids. That's just wrong. I can promise you that's just wrong. I understand that this is obviously a problem, and this is obviously something that they need to get fixed and do it as quickly as possible, but this is not an indictment on the culture at UGA. This is not an indictment of Kirby Smart's coaching style. This is not an indictment of the way that they go about business. What it is a real problem. It's something that absolutely has to be fixed because at the end of the day, this just can't keep happening. You can't keep putting people, including yourselves, in danger. And I don't know the fix. I wish I had this, magic fix that I could tell Kirby Smart tomorrow and all of this could stop happening up at UGA, but I don't, because there's been a lot of things that they've tried to put into place that haven't worked. There have been a lot of things that they've gone out of their way to really instill in these kids that hasn't worked to a certain degree. And it's one of those things that I was thinking of, ways to kind of get over this gap, kind of find some type of solution. the only couple of things I came up with were doc NIL opportunities and missed playing time. Those are the only two things that I could possibly think of. But on top of that, I don't know yeah, I think that would help. I think that would do something. But I also think that shouldn't have to be done in some of these scenarios. But at the end of the day, if that's what does have to be done to make this go away, then I think you got to do it. So at the end of the day, it's a couple of instances that are obviously just beyond terrible for this university, for these players, for these kids, and for Kirby Smart. I think that's got to be the overwhelming sentiment at UGA right now, is just frustration, is just kind of being not angry necessarily. I'm sure they're a little bit angry, but I think mostly just really frustrated because they feel like they've done a ton out there. I've heard a number of reports of the number of things they've done since that tragedy happened back in 2023 to instill this in these guys and make sure that this is not something that continues, and it's continued. They've had a couple of incidences before. Since March, we had Trevor Etienne actually just agreed to a plea deal on a DUI related charges. So a lot of this stuff is impossible to nail down. A lot of this stuff is impossible to look at it at face value and say, this is the fix. Say, this is the way that they need to go about it, and this is the way that you're going to make sure that none of this happens ever again. Because that doesn't exist. For a lot of people, just in general, there isn't a full fix for everyone. The reality is, this is something that to a certain extent happens, and it doesn't change that something needs to be done to make sure this happens much, much less around there, but it is also the reality of college football to a certain extent, where you have a head coach that is, the buck stops with him. He is the face of the program. Everything that happens at that program goes right back to him. He can't control 130 kids all at once. He can't be over their shoulder all at once, making sure that they're making the right decisions. Now, obviously, I think he's done a great job of making sure that when he can talk to these kids, he is talking to them that way, and he is making sure that they're making the right decisions. But at the end of the day, they are college kids. They are 18 to 22-year-olds that are going to make bad decisions. And the frustrating part is this has been a trend at that specific place for quite some time, and it doesn't change that it is a problem that Kirby Smart is going to have to deal with one way or the other. I do think he's done an incredible job of dealing with it up until this point and doing absolutely everything in his physical power to make sure that these things don't continue to happen. But at the same time, he is only one man. And their staff is only so many people, and they only have so many hours in a day. And these kids are adults. They're, professional athletes in a lot of ways, and it's going to be literally impossible to keep all of them in check. It doesn't change that something needs to happen with this. It doesn't change that something needs to be changed, and they need to move forward and just try to get a handle on this as best they can. But it is to say, some guys you just won't be able to get a handle on. And that is not an indictment on these three individuals by any means. Kids make mistakes, and I'm absolutely not here to tear down them or Kirby Smart or the UGA program by any means. But it is to say, this is a really, really tough business for so many different reasons, because Kirby Smart and his staff walk in that building every single day, have 130 guys to worry about, and on top of that, you got to win a lot of games. And if you don't win a lot of games, you're out the door. And you have to recruit a top-level class. And if you don't do that, you're out the door. And it creates a job that is, in some ways, literally impossible to make sure that some of this stuff doesn't happen. Now, I wish that more would happen around there. And frankly, I was listening to Josh Pate yesterday when he was discussing this, and he said something that I think just has to be the solution at this point for the most part. The players got to step up. At some point, I don't know who it is in that locker room. I don't know if it's Carson Beck. I don't know if it's Tate Ratledge, Malachi Starks, whoever it is. Someone needs to stand up in front of that locker room and say, we're better than this. We're not doing this anymore. We are not making these mistakes. We are not putting that on our university, on ourselves, on our coach, on our fan base. That's not fair to anyone, and that's not who you are. Because, frankly, I think a lot of these kids are just making mistakes. I'm not going to sit here and tear apart these kids for a mistake they made one night. That's just not going to happen. That will never happen. But it doesn't change that someone needs to step up. It doesn't change that someone in that room that is an outright leader needs to lead. Not on the field, but off the field in this scenario, because I'm not necessarily one to say this is going to, totally tarnish the UGA legacy if they go on and have a remarkable run over the next couple of years, but it'll change it. I can say that pretty confidently. I will look at it differently if this stuff continues to happen than if they get this under control and go on to have a really, really successful next, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it looks like. Overall, it's just this needs to get under control. That's the best way that I can put it, and it's one of those things that I wish I could tell you right now. This is how you get it under control. This is how you keep all these guys in check. This is how you make sure that none of this stuff ever happens again. But I don't have that answer. If Kirby Smart had that answer, he would have employed it on January 16th of 2023, and it would have been in effect, and none of this would have happened. So it's truly just a sad situation more than anything else. There were so many different things that have happened over the last little bit, even beyond UGA football, around college football, with some really horrifying deaths in this type of area, and specifically around UGA football. From that day back in January 2023, that was just a outright tragedy for everyone that was around. It carries much more weight in these incidences when they do happen. So I think this is one of those things that we're just going to have to hope that they figure out a way forward. We're going to have to hope that someone in that room, particularly I think a player, I think that's the person that likely needs to lead this charge more than anything else. And I think there needs to be change. I really don't know what it looks like. I fully believe that UGA and Kirby Smart have done just about everything they can think of to make this go away, but it hasn't. That doesn't change the fact that this is still a problem, and someone needs to step up. Someone in that locker room, I tend to believe a big-time player like Carson Beck or like Tate Ratledge or Malachi Starks or so many different guys. Someone needs to step up and say something and make sure that everyone understands that all of them are better than this, that all of them are better than what they've been doing the last little bit, and we'll find out if it all works. But as of right now, it's the one black mark on this UGA program is these off-the-field issues that I think they've been doing their darndest to get under control, but it doesn't change that they still exist. It doesn't change that they're still here, and it doesn't change that they got to get fixed as quickly as possible. So whether that's enforcing really harsh punishments, whether that's, the kids speaking up, I don't know what it looks like, but it's got to be something. There's no two ways about that. So we'll break that down kind of as it unfolds. We'll see if there's any positive news, hopefully, in the next little bit around this. But at the end of the day, it's always a terrible headline. It's always a terrible thing to see whenever this pops up on your screen. But let's take our second break here, and let's move on to recruiting. There is so much stuff going on in recruiting, and there are a couple of teams, including the Michigan Wolverines, that are really picking up some steam. So I'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.